Welcome to Peak, a growth sport production that explores the power of culture on organizational performance. For show notes and more information, visit our website at growth-sport.com. Now let's get started on your drive for peak performance.
Welcome to Peak. I'm Dr. Brian. Excited to talk a little bit more today about the levels of motivation to follow the leader. This is a follow-on of the previous two podcasts that we've been doing about this motivation. And today we'll dive into the final level of motivation to follow and perform, which is conversion. In our last two episodes, we talked about being compliant and being committed as levels of motivation to follow the leader. Let's review quickly where we are, but remember that many of the topics we discuss build on previous principles and ideas. So starting at the beginning of our series will help you catch up completely. As we've talked about, getting team members to follow the leader is often assumed, but is actually a very large challenge. People have to be nurtured through a process that begins with compliance and ends with what we'll talk about today, conversion. So let's start first with compliance. Compliance is motivated by fear of what will happen if the team member doesn't do the behavior. The behaviors are most likely to occur when the leader is present, and the motivation relies heavily on punishment as a motivation. That punishment doesn't have to be punitive to the team member directly from the leader. It can be put in existential terms of company survival, or job satisfaction, or other undesirable but natural outcomes. The point is that I fear something will happen if I don't do the behavior. Commitment stems from a completely different motivation. Rather than deriving from fear, commitment comes from a feeling of duty or obligation. It's something that should be done. Most militaries do a great job of creating this level of adherence. People do the right thing because it's the right thing. By the way, they are trained that whatever the leader asks is the right thing. So commitment is a much more powerful motivator than fear. Committed people will perform the requirements of the task whether the boss is present or not. There are many examples of this where people will even give up their lives because they're asked by their military commander to do so because it is the thing they committed to do. It's the right thing to do. Yet despite the tremendous delta in performance between compliant and committed, there's another level that is more powerful than this. Now, I will say this, if you've moved from compliant to committed, you'll think you've arrived. The delta is so big that you will feel that you've reached the highest level of performance and adherence, but that's not true. This next level, this level of conversion, at this level, the person is driven by something different. They're driven by love. The behavior is not something they do because they fear the consequence or because they feel they should. They do it because they want to. They desire to follow the leader because they love the leader, or they love the outcomes they're trying to achieve, or they love the values of the organization or the team and the things they stand for, or some other good they desire in their lives. And I'm going to use the term good as an economist would at this point, since I am an economist. But the idea here is that something that they can attach value to that they strive to achieve or attain. Like commitment, conversion will motivate team members to do the behavior regardless of who is watching or not. But unlike commitment, it will motivate team members to go beyond the requirements of what is right or sufficient or the duty associated with the tasks. They will go beyond the scope. The task will be accomplished at a higher level than is required in many cases. Conversion is a state of thinking that attaches value to the goods produced by working in the organization. And again, by goods, I don't mean the product or service the organization produces necessarily, although it could be that. But usually it's something different. And I'm going to refer to these as higher value goods produced when our behaviors and efforts align with the outcomes that bring happiness and satisfaction to the team member doing the work. So if I believe in what the organization is trying to achieve, and I believe in the methods by which they are trying to achieve those things, then desire and love will motivate my actions. If I can get team members to respond from a position of love, then I'm going to get very different outcomes than I will otherwise. So let's talk about a few of those different kinds of outcomes. First of all, and probably obviously, tasks will be done at the highest level of excellence that is possible given the current state of the organization's processes and understanding. So, put simply, team members won't cut corners. They'll do things to the very best of their knowledge and ability. Now, one outcome here that's really interesting is that team members doing things to the best of their ability will also uncover ways in which that process can be improved. They will find the defects of the process. They'll uncover what doesn't work well. And they'll have a desire and a motivation to innovate. So while doing the tasks at the highest level, team members see ways to do the tasks better. And because they desire to do it better, this will lead to individual innovation. Now, you can also get collective conversion and then collective innovation. At that time, the innovation will extend beyond the individuals to the team and then across teams throughout the organization. You can also see that you might have some members of your team that are converted, some members that are committed, some members that are only compliant. And we'll talk about this later and what you should do about that. Beyond innovation, the other thing that you'll get is loyalty. Now, loyalty is the first feeling that will come from conversion. When people are converted, no other person or external circumstance will deter the team member that is converted. Now, certainly, if there are enough events and enough people that call into question the person's value associated with the good that they are searching for, then it can have an impact on conversion over time. But loyalty makes conversion very resilient. Now, you can see this in the organization that we most often associate with conversion, which is religion. And if we take a small detour here to examine this, it will give us some insights into what it means for our organization. So let's look at what is probably the most intense of conversion incentives. So in religion, the goods that people are looking for are usually living forever and returning to God. Now, you can say, what would be a bigger good than that? To the extent that people believe this is a good that is attainable, then faith conversions are by far the most powerful, resilient, and long-lasting of any motivation. But you can also see what happens when people begin to believe that the goods either don't exist or are unattainable. In these cases, conversion wanes and people, quote, leave the faith. This has application to businesses and other non-religious organizations. To the extent that the organization can create clear lines of connection between missions, visions, objectives, all while ensuring that the end objectives are goods that people can believe in, then it's possible to create an environment that will foster conversion. Notice that it's not important, and indeed probably impossible, to create a quest for goods that everyone agrees equally will justify conversion. It's only necessary to do this for some people. The key is to craft the quest in such a way that the outcome is a good that meets the needs of enough people that some can believe in its production and delivery and attach themselves to your organization to help you achieve that. Now, let's come back from this diversion. If we can create a clear mission, vision, and values, and find the people that believe in what we're trying to accomplish, then we can, in many cases, get what I'll call religious conversion to the thing you're trying to accomplish. That's the strongest level of conversion. Now, you get all of those outcomes, and in addition, get all the other desirable outcomes that we talked about previously in other podcasts, including trust, transparency, and humility. Let's just go through this and you'll see how this happens. First of all, if I'm converted to the mission, vision, and values of an organization, I'm going to offer higher levels of trust to everyone in that organization from the get-go, because I have a belief that they also are converted to the mission, vision, and values. Now, you can see that if for some reason I find out they are not, then they will lose that trust. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm also going to be more transparent naturally, because I want people to understand what I'm doing and how I'm working to achieve the outcomes that I hope they are working to achieve. So in this case, again, transparency will be naturally offered until I'm given a reason not to do it. Finally, humility will also be naturally higher. I'll be willing to listen to others' views on how we can achieve the outcomes together. The outcomes are more important collectively than my own individual growth and progress, if that's what I value, if those are the goods that I value. So again, if I can get collective conversion, then all three of those traits will increase. Now, you can also see that this is a virtuous cycle, that the more trust and transparency and humility I have, the more likely it is that we'll be able to work together and achieve a common mission, vision, and values. And the more we're able to achieve that common mission, vision, and values, the more the trust and the transparency and the humility will increase. So how do we get it? First of all, it's really important to get fit with purpose. If you can identify the mission, vision, and values of your organization clearly, and then you can identify the people who resonate with that mission, vision, and values, they fit with that, you're going to have a much higher chance of getting to conversion. And again, as we just mentioned, this is a virtuous cycle. If people fit and they help build the mission, vision, and values, that makes that much clearer and more understandable to others, who can then also be converted to that mission, vision, and values. And they will come on, and you'll see a virtuous cycle. And that the more people convert, the clearer the mission, vision, values, the more progress you make, the more people will want to be a part of that. It's also then very important that you create strong visions and missions that people can understand and commit to. You can't be fuzzy here. It's critical that you really are clear about what you're trying to accomplish. People will not be able to convert to something they don't understand. In fact, oftentimes they'll convert to their own goods. So they'll convert to their own paycheck or to their own advancement or progression in the organization. And this ultimately actually detracts from the overall organizational mission, vision, and values. This leads me to my next point. You must be able to move committed people to converted over time through results. You need to recognize that people who are not good fits with your vision and who do not move quickly from compliant to committed and then to converted, usually within about a year's time, need to be moved on from your organization. I'll note that this is very different. This is not the same approach that most people would take. Many leaders will take an approach that try to keep the talented and skilled and move on the untalented and the unskilled. I'm not arguing that you shouldn't select for skills. That's important. But I will say that if you're evaluating first on will and then on skill, then you're evaluating first on the thing that cannot be taught and then on the thing that can be taught second. In other words, skills can be taught in most cases. Will almost never can be taught. If someone doesn't believe in what you're doing, then it's going to be very difficult to convert them. And ultimately, unconverted people become toxic to your organization and cause the organization to move away from what you're trying to do as a group. Okay, that's all for today. I'd like to thank all of our listeners. If you learned something from this podcast, please share it with your colleagues, associates, and friends. You can also like and follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. As the number of our listeners to this podcast grows, we've begun to get questions from our listeners about challenges they are facing as they lead their teams. If you have a question, let us know. Send me an email at Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, at growth-sport.com. We'll select some of these questions to address on future podcasts. Until then, we hope that your drive for peak performance is successful.
You've been listening to Peak, a Growth Sport production.